and change the battery. Okay. Well, Jesus says even more controversial things. So this, we don't have any new people in the class. Good to see Judy back. Judy, hi. Anyway, Tammy's still recovering. She's staggering around, but she'll get better. It just takes time.
Good wine.
She says the worst thing isn't the rotor-rooting. I thought that's the worst thing. It's the, what do you call it, where they fuse it, the fusation. I don't know. It seems to me the rotor-rooting around in your spinal column would be like the worst. Hey, watch out. Don't touch that. If you cut that, oh, what's wrong? Oh, no. Anyway, so we are in 7, and I talked about last week I talked about the Festival of Booths, because Jesus is, well, we're going to see what happens, but he basically, it is the time of the Festival of Booths, and that's a pilgrim festival. Everyone's supposed to go to Jerusalem for that festival. Whoa. Went to sleep. Wake up. I just told it to go wake up. Anyway, so here's the NIV. Jesus' brothers said to him, leave Galilee and go to Judea so that your disciples may see the works you do. And here's the Greek. Here's here's the King James and the transliterated Greek. Why won't this control the way I want it to? His brethren therefore said unto him, depart hence and go into Judea, that thy disciples also may see the works that thou doest. And here's the Greek, transliterated Greek, like usual. We're going to talk about this because this is very interesting stuff. Hereupon they said, accordingly certainly forward to him, the siblings of the same womb. This is the word adelphoi, siblings of the same womb. Adelpha will eventually get, okay, remember, nouns and verbs have gender. Human beings do not. And in Greek, there are 3 genders. There is feminine, masculine, feminine, and neutrum. And so adelphoi is masculine. So that is brothers, siblings who are brothers of the same womb. If it's adelpha, it would be sister siblings of the same womb. I put siblings of the same womb. The reason is because this is kind of generic, but it is specifically to brothers because that's the masculine form of him. Metapetha, you change your place, hence on both sides. This is a cool word. And you lead under, and we see this is a very common word. We saw this a lot in Mark, but lead under, Iphagi, to or into Judea, in order that, and the learners, disciples of you, Therosin, they will be spectators of the toils of you, to which what you are making or doing. Accordingly, his siblings of the same womb said forward to him, you change your place hence, and you lead under into Judea, in order that you and your learners, disciples, will be spectators of your toils which you are doing. What's really interesting about this is there's a totally different impression in some ways. The impression I got by reading the translations we have is that they're saying, go to your disciples that are hanging around in Jerusalem, when the reality is he's talking about the disciples, the learners that are there with him. But what's really neat about this is, and I think I got a commentary here. Let me show you I've got a really good map. I like this map a lot. Like I said, this makes this text unpublishable if I wanted to get it published, but I can't stand not having these really cool charts and maps that you can find. Anyway, this is Israel during the time of Jesus, and in the time, I love this, having a timeline on it. That's really, really, really cool. But what is neat about this chart is not only do we have the places that we're talking about, because right now, remember, Jesus is the rabbi of Capernaum. There's Capernaum right there. He's the rabbi of Capernaum. And they wanted to go down to Jerusalem. Jerusalem's a little bit further down on this chart. Go ahead and in Judea. So here's Judea. And here is, let's see, Jericho, and Jerusalem, right there. So, and all these are places, man, I should just reproduce this chart whenever we need this, because this has a lot of really neat places. But the best ever is look at what we have. Remember I told you the tetrarchs, there's 4, a tetrarch, right? And so before, all of this was ruled by Herod the Great, an Edomite. But you notice, this has it broken up into the areas of rule of the tetrarchs. So this is ruled by Herod Archelaus, and not so much. At the time, who was the head when Jesus was crucified of this area? Pilate, yes. Archelaus really got in trouble, and I think he went to Gaul, which is not. And Gaul is like in the south of France. But there were no restaurants and nice places. And there were the crazy head, yeah, that was a bad exile, which is really interesting because you'd say, hey, send me there anytime, right, today. But yeah, then it was terrible. Anyway, this is Herod Antipas. And Herod Antipas is famous at the time of Christ because he's the Herod that Pilate sent Christ to, Herod Antipas. Herod Antipas controls this area through Tiberias. And Tiberias, remember, was built on the top of the tombs. Ruled by Philip. Trachonitis, this area here, ruled by Philip. We don't hear much about Philip, but Philip was eventually, I believe he was exiled or killed. Something nasty happened to him. Something nasty happened to all of them. Because why do you think the Romans are really, look, the Romans are really smart. The Greeks are really, really smart, but they just talk about what they're going to do. What do the Romans do? They do what they want to do, and they're really smart. What's the best thing to do when you have a kingdom, right? What do you want to do? Break it up so they can't collude and work together. So what did they do? They broke it into tetrarchs, into 4. Said, hey, in the old days, right, one guy, the eldest son, would be the head. Oh, well, that happened to be Herod Antipas. Well, we're going to do a deal for you, Philip, and for you, Archelaus, we're going to make you the tetrarchs, so you get to share rule. And the Romans are like, and what do these guys do? Oh, yeah. Get some money, have some feudal stuff. This is great. It's all feudal, right? It's just like any monarch is a fascist. They're basically feudal socialism. Feudalism is socialism. So they're all fascist, socialist kind of stuff. It's all monarchs, and they all control everything. So they, right? They want to kill you. They make the laws, right? Anyway, then you have Perea. This ruled by Herod Antipas. Then you have Perea, and then you have the Decapolis. Decapolis is Greek. Perea is not ruled by, they show it kind of being ruled by Herod Antipas, but I didn't think he controlled it. But if you did, that's really smart too. I don't remember that. In my book, Scythopolis was the place that they had the big battle. And all this, the biggest problem with all this area is the, what are those called? The Scythians and the other group were always a constant problem for the Romans. And so the Romans kept them on this side of the river, the Jordan River, because that way they controlled it. Good rivers are always impediments to military travel and to fighting. So anyway, I think this is really cool stuff. And so here's Capernaum, there's Jerusalem, and Jesus said, I'm not going. And I got some notes here about the brother. Yeah. Modern translators and translations. As a matter of fact, we talked about a little bit last week, not fully intentionally, but the virgin birth, right? Not the virgin birth is not the problem. It's the incarnation of Mary, right? The Immaculate Conception of Mary, which we as Lutherans, and by the way, what do the Orthodox? I don't think the Orthodox believe in that. I'm almost certain they don't. Do they? The problem you got is if you believe in original sin, it's going to lead you down the path of the Immaculate Conception. It's the only way you can get there. Why? Because for Jesus to be born without original sin, Mary has to be born without original sin, which is the problem of the logical problem. And I'm not presenting that. I'm not, this isn't a theology class. I'm just telling you where you go. Okay, that's where you got. You want to study that on your own, go study on your own. But the problem with that is in Catholic theology, and I'm not getting down on the Catholics, but the Catholics are the only ones that I think believe this or think this. In Catholic theology, Mary did not have any other children. Mary did not have sex with Joseph, ever. Yeah, which is...
You're right. The Orthodox reject the dogma of Immaculate Conception.
I think only the Catholics are there. And you know why the Catholics got there, right? Okay, this is one of the... Fortunately or unfortunately, I went to a Lutheran college, and I had an excellent religious education through it because they gave us the Christian classics. And so I was required to have 2 religion courses. And one of them was in the Christian classics, which I think was the best course ever because I had to read all that stuff that you don't want to read. It's really boring stuff, puts you to sleep. But if you have to read it, this is great stuff. And then I also had one on world religions, which was not as good because I had a wacko as a professor. But the classics class was astounding because what it does is it goes through the philosophy and theology through the writings of the saints, right? Starting with the Bible, you mostly have that, but it has the Apostolic Fathers. You move the Apostolic Fathers to the next generation, which is mostly Augustine and Christophilum, to the next generation, and you see how the philosophy or thought moved. The thing is that the church, the Catholic Church, has been tied very firmly to philosophy and theology, which is not bad. That's not a bad thing, except it will lead you down rabbit holes. Now, you can sit with the rabbit holes you want. Almost no one, okay. Does anyone here believe that an infant that is born is going to hell or purgatory, or even if there is a purgatory? That is also a Catholic idea that's not in Lutheranism or limbo. Okay, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands, but I'm telling you what, if you believe in original sin very firmly, which the Catechism teaches, then you believe that an infant must be baptized immediately or they are going to hell. And that's it. That's all there is. If you are fully fettered in that philosophy. And like I said, I'm not teaching theology. I'm just telling you what the world is about. So you got to hear this. And I'm not going to stand on any side or take any position. But there is something that is important about this position, because the translators in our translations tried to shape this, that is brethren, right? They use the term brethren. That is when it says the brothers of Christ, right? The siblings of the same womb. What do you think the Greeks say about this? Who's the siblings of the same womb?
But didn't, for example, Paul used that word just to play devil's advocate in the epistles when he talks to the Christians in another church and says brothers.
Because after Christ, then you could be adopted into the family of Christ. And a huge concept in Christianity has been the adoption of believers by Christ into the family of God, into the family of Jehovah. So you say yes, and I don't disagree at all. I'm totally in agreement with what you just said. However, what we're talking about here is in the life of Christ. And you could say, okay, and this is what the Catholic view is, that going back, these are talking about his brethren. However, I've got some great, here, we're going to apply some logic, okay? So I'm going to just state right here, this is a thing that these are general brothers. Try to assert these are brethren as disciples or those from the synagogue in Capernaum, okay? We'll start, we'll go with that. Okay, in Greek, this is not impossible, right? But it's highly doubtful. And the reason it's highly doubtful, in the first place, they can't be continuing disciples. Why? We're going to find out that they are not convinced. Okay. Second, they can't be members of the synagogue in Capernaum. if they are not convinced or not under Jesus' teachings as a rabbi? How can they be brothers? In other words, if Jesus, and we know Jesus is the rabbi of Capernaum, that's the point that was made before. It's the unstated telos of 6. So Jesus is the rabbi of Capernaum. So therefore, if they are under his teachings, right, but they're not convinced, if he's going to be a rabbi, what do you have to be a rabbi? The agreement of the males in the community that that person is able to handle being a rabbi. So if they are not his real brothers, right, sibling of the same womb, then they're definitely not going to be his members of his synagogue. Anyway, if they're not convinced or under Jesus' teaching, the rabbi have to be his brothers. The Greek is very clear that they are siblings of the same womb. And these are the brothers and sisters, I would say sisters, of Jesus, born of Mary and Joseph after Jesus. So I'm going to put a stick in the sand, and I'm going to say the Greek proves this to us. Yes, ma'am.
Just a question on the same topic. The Catholics will also try to put forth the ideas that either of these could have been step siblings of Jesus because they were born to Joseph from a previous marriage, or also that in the ancient world, sometimes words for relations aren't actually literal, like Jesus was called the son of David, and he was really the great grandson, not actually the son, and so on. And that these sometimes they use the same words for siblings and cousins and so on. But I would think in Greek there was maybe something more concrete for those. Do you know if there's words for those other relations in Greek?
Greek is always concrete, but I'll give you the real one. Remember, what do I always translate correctly? And you'll find it. Go look in your Greek. It's not son, it's huios. Huios literally means the offspring. So if you translate huios, and there's another word in Greek for son, I think it's patie is another word for son. So if I use a certain word in Greek that's very concrete about a specific lineage, but if I use the word huios, I'm implying neither male or female, and I'm implying that it's an offspring. So Jesus can be an offspring of David, right? He can be an offspring of God. He can be an offspring of man, right? Huios of Anthropos. So these are, as I said, the Greek gives us the concrete and exact.
So are there words for cousins or step siblings or things of that nature? If he had step siblings or they were cousins.
Oh yeah.
Because they're, I've had Catholics talk to me about this, and they're like, well, and the, extended family was like close family, and they all lived together, and in other, languages, it's the same word for cousin and son, brother and stuff like that.
Oh no, okay. Every language, okay. What is the most important structure in the world? Family, period, dot. Every language has every gradient of familial relationships. Every single one of them, right? If I say that you're a sibling of the same womb, what do you think? You're a cousin?
Biological sibling.
Yeah, exactly.
Same mother, maybe different father.
Well, and the thing that's important about sibling of the same womb, right?
Yeah, it can't be they had different mothers. They have to have the same mother.
Exactly. And the Greeks have a word for that. And the Greeks, look, you think the Greeks have a word for every type of association, every type of grouping, every type of love, every type of communication. Do you think they don't have a word for every type of relationship? I'm just saying, to get there, you got to go. Even the Romans, right? The Romans do, and the Hebrews. Yes, Hebrews.
Talking about the genealogies in Hebrew, that gets a little hairy.
Well, the Hebrews remember, Hebrew is worse than English. Hebrew is the worst language in the world for euphemism is Japanese. Japanese is probably the worst of the worst. But Hebrew is like a dead second. Hebrew is, remember, I showed you years ago, we did the Psalms class. Elf, this A symbol in Hebrew can mean companionship, lover, friend, ox, a, one. I mean, keep going. It can mean so many things that when you see it, you go, what does it mean? And if you see it in context, you might be able to pull it out. But a psalm, what do poets automatically want you to do? They want you to read the same thing in multiple ways. So when you hit a psalm and you hit elf, you're like, okay, what, are they elf like in a pasture? Or like I've told you, in the most beautiful example in Japanese, the same sentence that means the virgin girls walking across the flowered plain can be the beautiful blue flowers on the plain. The same word for carp is a word for love. You never tell somebody that you love them. You say, I like you a lot. Suki and daisuke. So, you think your language is euphemistic, and it is. English is really euphemistic. How many ways can you love someone? How do I love you? Like pizza, like my pet, like my wife, romantically? I mean, that's what old Shakespeare wrote. How do I love you? Let me count the ways. I'm like, okay, Shakespeare's making a joke here. He is, because remember, what does Shakespeare know? Greek, Latin, much more educated than we are. And that was what? Hundreds of years ago. Anyway, my point is this, and like I said, I'm not pounding the Catholics. They're our buddies. They're our brothers and sisters. So don't go pounding them back. It's good to have debate. But, remember, if you start pounding them, what are you pounding against? Original sin. And what do good Lutherans believe? Original sin. So if you start pounding the Catholics, you got a real problem. And guess what? They have 1,000 more years of philosophy and theology than you have, so you better study up if you want to fight that battle. But I'm just saying, this is obviously siblings in the same womb. They're his real brothers and possibly sisters. The reason I know that is because, remember I told you masculine, it's a masculine noun. But what do we include a lot of times in masculine nouns in ancient languages? Females, too. It's just the way you do it, especially. There's no such thing as a gender-neutral siblings of the same womb, right? So when I put the male siblings of the same womb, I can also be including females because that's the way languages work generally. Especially, all right, anybody study German or maybe, what's the most terrible thing about German you had to contend with?
Gender of nouns.
Why?
Because it makes no sense and you have to memorize a whole lot more.
Well, in English, you can say, in English, you used to be able to say he, and it was replaced for them, they, and hers, right? Because he's could mean anything. And you could do that all day. In German, you always have to say, if you mean,
The exact one.
you have to say Herr und, what was it? She and him. He and her. Oh man, why can't I remember? I mean, my brain is gone. Anyway, you have to say und, you have to say male und the female form every time because they don't have. There is no such thing as a genderless pronoun in that means a human being.
Man. M-A-N.
No, those are the I'm talking about the pronouns. Er und er und no for she for sie er und sie. You have to say er und sie. Er und sie. Why can't I remember this? I speak German anyway. Obviously I haven't studied enough. Anyway, er und sie. You always have to say er und sie on him and her. You have to always do that. You can't like you could in English. Now, of course, in English today, we always have to say he and she, right? Or he, him or her, because that's become the wokeism that you have to do. But I'm just saying, in the past, you could do that. In German, you can't do that. And in gendered societies, you can't do that. This is what the Greeks do. Now to the next one. No one who wants to become a public figure acts in secret. Since you are doing these things, show yourself to the world. And here we have the Greek. And For there is no man that doeth anything in secret, he himself seeketh to be known openly. If thou do these things, show thyself to the world. And you notice the King James, remember, the NIV does not, but the King James always shows us where they added words. They added words for context to fix it for you and make it more sound more normal. But these words are not in there. The there is that. It's not there, so let's see what it says. Otis, not even one. Gar, sounding a reason. T, a certain one or thing, anyone. In, crypto, concealed, makes or does. Kai, zetai, he worships or plots. And like I said, this zetai word is really interesting because it means to worship or to plot. And how that fits together in Greek, I have no real idea. I cannot explain it very well. Himself, in parrhesia, all outspokenness. Parrhesia is a word that is really translated differently and weirdly sometimes, but and sometimes they translate this word as almost a spiritual word. And sometimes they translate it just someplace. But it means all outspokenness. In to be, that's one of the to be forms, the identity forms. If tauta, pois, you make or do, pharosin, to render apparent. And look, pharosin, we've got that's the basis of phanos. Phanos being one of the words for speaking, so to render apparent. Saton, yourself to the cosmos. These guys are much better theologians than our translators. But here it is in the Greek. Here's the direct translation or the cultural translation. Assigning reason, not even one does anything in concealment. Assigning reason, not even one does anything in concealment. Not the qualification that said before. And he plots himself in all outspokenness to be. If you do these, you render yourself apparent that which was created. This is pretty deep Greek. I mean, these his brothers, maybe they're listening to what Jesus is talking about, but they at least understand about what? They understand about the cosmos, the created universe. And do you notice the word they don't use? They didn't say apparent to the gay, or apparent to people, else, or apparent to ethnos, or apparent to this or that, to the nation. What did they say? Apparent to what? The creation, that which was created. What an amazing statement you get from his, okay, maybe his brothers ain't listening well, but they're listening a little bit, and this is pretty interesting because this is pretty deep theology and philosophy right here. I think it's beautiful. Assigning a reason, not even one does anything in concealment. That's a pretty interesting statement itself. And he plots himself in all outspokenness to be. If you do these things, you render yourself apparent to that which was created. Okay? For even his own brothers did not believe him. Okay? And so what does that say? For neither did his brethren believe in him. Ode, not however, gar, assigning a reason. And remember, gar is mostly translated for. Here's our for, but gar does not mean for. And I'll repeat this to you because I like gar. Gar is a philosophical term in Greek. It is a philosophical term that means assigning a reason. So it's not, oh yes, okay. For might be a translation for assigning a reason, but for just means for. It's a preposition. Gar is a preposition, like I said, in Greek philosophy. It means, remember how we say logos? I'm making a logical argument. Gar says, I am assigning a reason to a point that I'm making. So, assigning a reason, the Adelphos, siblings of the same womb, auto of him, pistoian, they were convinced by a logical argument, eis intuer to him. And of course, where's the, yeah, not however. Ode. Assigning a reason, his siblings of the same womb were not, however, convinced by a logical argument unto him. So they were not convinced of what he was saying. So this automatically gets you, like I said, can be people of the Capernaum synagogue? No. Can they be people that are his disciples? No. There's only one logical thing that they could be. His brothers. So this is beautiful stuff. And by the way, this is not an unstated telos. John would say, this is a stated point, right? You're not supposed to miss this. How you could miss, John would slap you off the side of the head. Meg, I'm sorry, but John would slap the Pope on the side of the face and say, you doofus, I wrote it. Can't you read it? And he would say, no, I don't read Greek, but that's okay.
Neither. We based a lot of theology on Latin, which is a translation, not the actual original.
That is a very true statement. That's part of our problem too. We look at the Apostolic Creed. The Apostolic Creed was probably originally written in Greek, but it was translated very early into Latin. And the Nicene Creed was also, as far as we know, it may have been written originally in Latin and not in Greek. So, and the reason why do you think they wrote the Nicene Creed?
To fix the problems with the heresy that rose from the ambiguity of the Apostles' Creed.
To fix the problems of some heresy, but it wasn't, I'll disagree, it wasn't the ambiguity of the Apostles' Creed. The Apostles' Creed, I think, was in Greek. And we don't have any evidence. We don't, remember, the problem with the creeds is, what do? You say them. You don't write them down in, societies that generally need to memorize them, right? Because you just pass them on. So the problem was, it probably was in Greek, but very quickly translated to Latin. The problem with the Latin dudes is the Latin is euphemistic. It's a Romance language. The Greek is very concrete. So if you knew Greek, you're like, I got this. But if you're Latin, you're like, where's the conclusion? Give me the telos. Give me the reason. Give me the answer, right? So very quickly, the Nicene Creed was created to counter heresies. But the problem is that they figured that the Apostolic Creed didn't say enough when it was translated into Latin. And that's true. Dispel from your minds. The scriptures, the Old Testament, New Testament have not been translated and retranslated in different tongues. That did not happen. However, because Greek was the language of the world at first, and then the language of the world was Latin. Okay? Right? Latin up until about the 1800s, just so you know. Latin and French kind of took over after that. Now English from the beginning of the 1900s is pretty much the language of the world. But Latin was the language of the world, and so therefore you have to turn everything from the Greek into Latin. And guess what? It's not the general people who know it, it's the educated people who know it. And by the way, I'll throw this out because this is a beautiful thing. Anybody read Last Mohicans? I think it's Last Mohicans, right? In Last Mohicans, remember there's the itinerant preacher who's going around preaching, and his theology is totally whacked. And he's a comedy figure. How much you want to bet? Because he barely knows English, and he's an English speaker, but he definitely doesn't know any Latin or Greek, right? And he's reading from the King James Bible and trying to interpret the King James Bible from the English. How successful do you think he is? The reason this is a joke, and the reason Fenimore Cooper made this joke, he was very well educated, and he was irritated at the itinerant preachers who wandered America teaching basically totally non-correct theology from the King James Bible because they could, because it was in their hands, right? They had one, and they could carry it around. So, in America, the itinerant preacher I'm talking about in I think it's in Last Mohicans. He appears in a couple of Fenimore Cooper's Natty Bumppo novels. But the big deal is that I don't think he even had a copy of it. He was going from memory. And his memory wasn't that good. So there are malapropisms all over the place. And it's a comedy. It's a joke. The kids reading it today won't get the joke because why?
They don't know anything.
They don't know the script. They don't know the King James. They never read it, right? So when the guy gives out a quote and it's totally wrong, we go, if you've read the King James, you go, huh? And you laugh. Well, hopefully you laugh. If they read it, they go, oh, this must be true, right? So yeah, we've reached an era of funniness. Anyway, of interestedness. Anyway, assigning a reason is simply the same one. We're not, however, convinced by logical argument into him. And that's what Jesus' brothers. Therefore, Jesus told them, my time is not yet here. For you, any time will do. Now, this is an interesting statement in the English, in our translation. King James isn't much different. Jesus said unto them, my time is not yet come, but your time is always ready, which is, by the way, a better translation. Legeia, he makes a logical argument, according certainly to them. The Jesus, the Kyrios, an occasion, opportune time, ho, the amounts of me, opo, not yet, priest to be near. The but Kyrios, the occasion, the hementros of you, panatote, everyone, all times, estin is hetolemus, adjusted already. Here's the translation, the cultural translation. This is a little bit difficult. Remember, this is John, and John has given us an unstated logical argument, right? Accordingly, Jesus makes a logical argument to them. My opportune time is not yet near, but your opportune time is every when adjusted. All right. The Jesus part's really easy to understand. Why isn't it his opportune time? I got the notes down there so you could.
He hasn't been anointed. Ordained as a priest, not ordained.
Well, we use the term ordained, but that's probably about the same, right? He's supposed to be the Messiah. The Messiah, what does Messiah mean?
Anointed one.
The anointed one, yeah. So if he's the Christus in Greek or the Messiah in Hebrew, he has to be anointed. Has he been anointed? No. Now, he is a rabbi in Capernaum, which is really coolio stuff, right? That's his occupation. That's what he does. He's not a fisherman. He's not a carpenter. He's a rabbi. And there's more that comes to this head about that, which is very interesting. But he's not been anointed, so he can't be revealed. And what's the big thing? I told you about it, the 118th Psalm. At the end of the Festival of Booths, and we went through this, the Festival of Booths, the big deal is the high priest, they take the water, the living water, from the pool of Shiloh, from Hezekiah's pool, and they drag it in a procession, dancing and screaming and tambourines, and it's cool. And the lelubs, you know, the different pieces of wood, 5 different pieces of wood, one in one hand, the other in the other hand, and they go to the temple and they dance and they march, and the priests go around the altar, and the altar's been cleaned. The last step is to pour the living water from the pool of Shiloh onto the altar. That's a high point. And when that happens, the high priest says, the 118th Psalm. And the end of the 118th Psalm is, blessed is he who comes in the name of Yahweh. And he doesn't say it out loud, according to Josephus, because he doesn't want the common people to hear the name of God. No one knows how to pronounce it now because of that. And when he does, what's supposed to happen while he waits? He's supposed to wait. And according to the rabbis, okay, according to the priests and the rabbis, they believe that the Old Testament Torah teaches that the Messiah would stand up in the temple and announce himself. So that is why Jesus tells them, my opportune time is not now. He tells them, your opportune time is every when adjusted. In other words, you don't have an opportune time. You're going to be there because that's where you're supposed to be, right? And we'll talk about that. We're going to get to that point. But anyway, the world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testified its works are evil. This is another one of those really cool theological points that John is throwing at us through the dialogue, just like C.S. Lewis talks about it. The world cannot hate you, but it hateth, because I testify that the works of it are evil. That sounds really direct, right? Let's see what it says in the Greek. Ooh, no, we're not. Dananatai. He is powerful. The cosmos, that which was created, Messi, to detest you, may. But Messi, to test that or because ego, there's an ego. I bear witness or testify, martyrio, peri, through all over of it. That or because the ergo, the toils of it, are hurtful. Ponera, that's where we get pornography from. Ponera, they're hurtful. They are. And they what is really interesting, number one, we have an ego statement. It doesn't have an imi like I am, so it's not a direct identity from Christ, but he uses ego, which is, he didn't have to. Martyro, it implies I. It's the first person, thing. So he didn't even have to include that in the verb. You don't have to say I. He did. He included I. And estin, we have they are, which is a identity statement. So like I said, John is odd as a written piece of Greek because it's full of these identity statements. And of course, we got Jesus using I, which is really odd in the ancient world in any case. So here's the translation. That which was created, the orderly arrangement, the cosmos, is not powerful, able, or possible to detest you. To detest you. That's interesting. That's kind of, if he wanted to say what this says, it would be the gay cannot, and there's another word in Greek, I can't think of it, but if I wanted to just say hate, but the word detest is very interesting. That which was created is not powerful. Here they use cannot, right? But it's not that at all. It's not powerful. It's not able or possible to detest you, but it detests me. Because I bear witness all over of it that its toils are hurtful. Now, I want to remind you, this is a very important and powerful statement. Jesus was the creative power, the logos that made the cosmos. Can never forget that. That is the most important point of John through the whole. Remember the beginning? In the beginning was the logos, the word, and the command word. And the command word was God. Wow, okay, beautiful, beautiful logos, logical statement. And here we get this. Jesus is the creative power, the logos that made the cosmos. However, that same cosmos is fallen. That's the point that John is reminding us of. And Christ. Well, Christ is reminding us of. The creation detests the creator because the creator shows that it's fallen. This is just another statement by Jesus where he's claiming to be God. And, you say, how many times can John say this? Well, John thought it was really important for you to know. We have that. Then we have the thing, that's in John, where Philip goes, show us the Father. And Jesus, I bet Jesus slapped him. Wouldn't you, if you were Jesus, you just slap him. Dude, I told you over and over and over again. You look at me and you see the Father because I am the Father. Dude, are you stupid? Yeah. Unfortunately, yeah, we are, right? But that's the problem. The creation is just created because the Creator shows that it's fallen. In addition, Satan is the prince and power of the gay. Satan is the prince and power of the gay, not of the cosmos, right? Not of the cosmos, but of the gay. The problem here is not really the cosmos, although the cosmos is fallen, that which was created is fallen. But the problem isn't necessarily the cosmos. The problem is really the gay. But you notice that word is not used in here. I think this is what we would call, again, an unstated telos in the words. But in any case, here we go to 8. You go to the festival. I'm not going up to this festival. It just says this festival. That's probably pretty good because my time is not yet fully come. Which we understand. We got it. He's not been anointed. You go up to this feast. I go not up yet unto this feast, for my time is not yet full. One. Highness, you, Abate, go up. I enter into the Harden, a festival. Ego, I. nor not, anabanio, am going up to or into the Heraton, the festival, Houghton, Hote, that is because the emos, my kerios, my occasion, my opportune time, not yet pepleroteai, has been made replete. You up to the festival, I am not going up to the festival because my opportune time has not been made replete. It's not complete. Okay, he means public. We've talked about this. He hasn't been anointed, etc. Not going to the pilgrim festivals is considered an unpardonable sin by the Jewish people. This is one of the 36. In fact, not hearing the shofar on Rosh Hashanah at the last day of the festival is one of the big 36. I didn't list the 36 for you. I could. I didn't figure we need them. The 36 include the Big 10, the 10 Commandments. There are 26 other things that you cannot, if you break any of the Big 10s, you're done. If you break any other 26, you're done. These are badnesses. So, and by the way, the big 36s include if you have a bite of any during the Passover, if you even get a smidgen, a bite of fermented anything in your mouth at any time, you're done. If you don't hear the shofar at the end of Rosh Hashanah, you're done. If you touch a dead body and eat teruma without a mitzvah, you're done. There's a list, 36. It's in the Jewish handbook. Anyway, a lot of them aren't applicable today because you can't eat teruma. Oh man, you didn't eat teruma, you're done. Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't follow the mitzvah and you have teruma, of course, don't worry, there's no teruma. So anyway, this is deep stuff, but anyway, we already said that Jesus didn't go to the Passover, but what happened in Capernaum? Or what happened in the 5,000? There was a Passover. It's an unstated telos. So, we don't know. It doesn't state that because that would be very, that would be very negative for them to say that directly. But it gives us the impression, and unstated telos, that Jesus did not go up to the Passover. So this may not have been that odd. Now, we know that you always have to go to the Passover. That's how come we know that Paul was there at Jesus' execution and resurrection. Why? It was at Passover. All the Jews had to be there. So that means Paul was there. Paul never claimed to be there, but, I wouldn't either if I was. That's the ancient world. After he had said this, he stated, of course, today, everything's a tell-all, right? So Paul today in America would probably give you a whole book, maybe 400 pages about how, he was, his whole life and whatever, and he could afford to write that. They might or might not publish it. When he said these words to them, he abode still in Galilee. Counter these, but upon having said to them, he stayed into the Galil. But he having said these to them, he stayed in the Galil, in Galilee. However, after his brothers had left for the festival, he went also not publicly, but in secret. Ooh. But when his brothers were gone up, he also went to the feast, not openly, but as it were in secret. Which how, Abesian, they gone up, the Adelphoi, the siblings of the same womb, this is plural, of him into the Heraton, the festival, the wind, and autos, he anebe went up. Not, Phaneros, rendered apparent. Phaneros, cool word. Other things, contrary-wise, which how in crypto, concealed. But when in this matter his siblings of the same womb had gone up to the festival, and he went up not rendered apparent, contrary-wise, in concealment. So this is kind of cool. Was he dressed up in a different way, not as a rabbi? Did he go as a common guy? If someone would do someone actually do a really good movie of this kind of stuff, we'd have some really neat things, right? But nobody does that, unfortunately. Jesus would have to go up to the festival because to do otherwise would break a commandment and it would be a sin. Telling a lie, I just want you to know, for him to tell his brothers he wasn't, a lot of people would say, well, he told a lie. Guess what? False witness is a sin. Not going to pornography is a sin. However, what's false witness?
When you say something incorrect about what someone else did, or you lie about your brother, or something in court, or maybe to your neighbor.
Yeah, okay, guys. If your wife says, does this make me look beautiful? And it doesn't, you may safely answer, yes, honey, it makes you look beautiful. You're the most beautiful being on the face of the earth, okay? That is okay. Ladies, if your husband says, do I look a little flabby to you? It's okay to say, honey, you look great. I love you the way you are. Okay, even if it's not completely true, lying in itself is, by the way, not a sin. It's false witness. So, now, if you tell your friend, my husband is an MMA fighter and he could, beat the tar out of you, and then she brings her husband, who's an MMA fighter, and says, hey, Brad, it's time for you to put up or shut up, right? Yeah, that's false witness. Or if you're in a court of law and you lie about something, that's false witness. By the way, that's why under the law in America, and the Constitution, you can't compel a wife to testify against her husband. And you can't compel someone to testify against himself. Although they sure have gone around that, making people give up their diaries and emails. Isn't that compelling people to testify against themselves?
That's blatantly going against the amendment about being secure in your person's papers and effects without, a warrant.
I thought she had to agree, which means you better tell her she looks pretty.
You better agree. That's right. Better agree, no matter what. And you better you better not tell the TSA off, even though they're in a legal search and seizure. I can't imagine how we got that passed, but obviously your freedom doesn't matter
We were
compared
already
to the
pretty
terrorists.
far gone before
Yeah.
But it's all one step after another.
So, if you want to look at this in a like I said, this is an optional look at, okay? But if you want to look at this as a telos kind of thing, we noted that a Passover happened in Capernaum because Jesus is the Passover lamb, and he created a Passover in Capernaum. So therefore, if he did go, that's cool. If he didn't go, that's really interesting. That's really cool. Just saying. So I'm saying that Jesus, this was an indication or sign that Jesus is the Messiah and God. That is the Passover thing. Now, and by the way, so the Passover would be in spring. If this was the next Festival of Booths, our thing said it's autumn, but really Festival of Booths is Rosh Hashanah going to the new year, and then almost right after that's Hanukkah. So about September, November period, approximately. Now, at the festival, the Jewish leaders were watching for Jesus and asking, where is he? There's more to this in the Greek. Here's what King James said. The Jews sought him at the feast and said, where is he? That's really different than Judean leaders, isn't it? Certainly, accordingly, Judeans. Do you see leaders in there? I don't see any leaders in there. The NIV said it's the Jewish leaders. Where'd they find that? They just made it up. As a tone, we're seeking to plot a worship. That's that zetone. The E in front is a noun or a verb form that makes it aorist. It's a aorist principle. So anyway, I'm not going to go all the verb forms, but just when you see an E, usually that indicates a specific verb form, usually a specific principal verb form. And I'm not going over the verb forms. That just gets way too complicated. We're singing the Plata worship hymn into the Horta, to the festival, and Elejon. They were making a logical argument at what locality is that one there, meaning Jesus. Accordingly, the Judeans, so closer to this, were seeking to plot or worship him. And I left it in because the word is ambiguous in Greek. They're seeking to plot, they're seeking to worship. What do you think? I think there's an ambiguity on purpose with that word in Greek, because it also shows kind of that weirdness in Greek, right? About their, remember, and I always have to remind you, I guess, because remember the oracles? They were women. The women were always oracles. They sniffed supposedly the stuff coming out of the ground, and they would go into a oracular thing, trance, but in the glossolalia, the glossolalia. They did not do glossolalia. They did Kladon. Glossolalia is an intelligible foreign language. A Kladon is a maybe partially intelligible, the words of the gods. So she would say a Kladon, the words of the gods. And originally people would just write down what she said or memorize what she said, and then they would go with that. After the Athenians took over Delphi, which was, they defeated Thebes. Anyway, this is well before this is well before Alexander the Great. This is well before that period. But the Athenians controlled Delphi. They controlled the treasuries at Delphi. And so, guess what? If they didn't like what the priestess said, they would have the priest standing next to her, and he would interpret her words. And by the way, her prophecies, the prophecies of the Delphic oracle at Delphi, reduced in their accuracy significantly after Athens took over. We got that historically. It's really cool. So she was very accurate for a period of time, and then she became less accurate when the Athenians were interpreting. And they reached a point where they even just didn't interpret. They said, Snivet, are you alive? Maybe. This is what she said, right? So the prophecies even became worse after that, according to history. But that's just history. So you see what I'm saying? Plot and worship in a Greek mind, zetei, right?
I'm wondering if some were planning on doing one or the other.
Yeah.
Could have been a group
Some-
of people, some
yeah.
were plotting to kill him, some were there to
Take
worship
it
him.
either way.
Yeah, exactly. See, that's why I think this word in Greek is really a great word. So according to Judaism, we're seeking to plot or worship him into the festival, and we're making a logical argument. At what locality is that one there? Everybody was looking for him. Why did he have to be there?
It was an unpardonable sin not to.
It's a pilgrim festival. You got to be there. They're looking for him there. So Jesus didn't necessarily trick his brothers. Maybe his brothers knew what he was going to do. Maybe not, because of the previous episode that we had, remember? So maybe it was ambiguous. But the big deal is they're looking for Jesus. And that's where we got to stop. Thank you, Lord, for your word. We pray you look after us this week. In your name we pray. Amen.